We're in a crisis of poor health. We've solved the acute health problems, which we solved 50 years ago. Congratulations. You get an infection now, we have great solutions. You break a bone, we're in good hands. Everything else is terrible. Again, people are like, oh, that's going to be hard. I don't know if there's a way to do this where it's not hard. Even psychologists will tell you this. Like, there has to be an element of struggle for us to feel happy. I personally don't think you'll find those answers in Western medicine. I think those answers have been pondered for, thousands of years in spiritual practices. And what they'll tell you is that challenge is important. You're going to be different. You're not going to be like everybody else. You're going to be weird. Do you want to be like everyone else? Again, look at the data. No, I don't. I don't want to be like everybody else. I don't want my kids to meet every women desire with technology and pornography and terrible food, because it doesn't make you happier, everybody. It just makes things faster, but you're not happier.
You're listening to the Born Primitive Podcast.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Born Primitive Podcast. How we doing, Tony?
Morning, Bear. Doing good.
You start getting your ass back in the gym yet?
No, it's certainly not. This is not a discipline issue. This is simply we have. So, and for the guest who's listening now, we have,
you're about to get your balls busted by the next guest.
No, I think he'll understand.
Okay.
We had our third daughter, and they're all under 2.5. So we are still. She's a month old. We're working out what that schedule looks like. So there's going to have to be some. I can't. Leaving her with all three is if you leave either with three, it's almost undoable. So,
I can't imagine.
God bless you. Congratulations, man.
Thank you. I've been keeping a 60-pound kettlebell around the house, so I'll get in some kettlebell swings, and then we built this like jungle gym in their playroom that has like a ladder with like this rock wall and stuff. So I'll get like 5 sets of chin-ups in a day. So I'm doing bare minimum right now, but it's at least something.
Well, speaking of that, I want to intro our guest for today. Today's guest is Sal Di Stefano. Did I do that justice, Sal? Last name?
Close. Di Stefano. Close. Oh, shit. So close that time.
Di Stefano. Sorry, we're doing this live here, folks. I don't do readbacks on these bios. Sal is a renowned fitness expert, co-founder of Mind Pump Media, co-host of the popular Mind Pump podcast, which delivers raw fitness truths to its audience. His passion for fitness ignited at the age 13, leading him to become a personal trainer by 18. And by 22, he owned his own gym. Sal is also a published author known for the resistance training revolution and is dedicated to providing honest and science-based fitness information to his audience. You guys can learn more at Mind Pump Media and follow Sal and his team on Instagram at Mind Pump Media. And then Sal's individual is Mind Pump Di Stefano. Is that it? Boom. Nailed it. Only took me 3 tries. So, Sal, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you so much for having me on. And again, congratulations on your new baby over there.
Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, that's very commendable. It's awesome. Not a lot of men these days take that responsibility on. So that's great.
I appreciate that. And it has been nothing but a blessing, although as you know personally, there certainly is a innate amount of chaos, but it's beautiful, especially when you're able to have those moments. And my wife and I were just talking about this. When you're able to kind of step back and actually view it from a bird's eye view, the chaos can be overwhelming, but you have those little micro moments where just extreme gratitude and kind of appreciation for how our lives have changed over the last 3.5 years.
Totally. And it's a season, it's a short season. It feels crazy and chaotic, but then things start to calm down, and then you'll have these incredible adult children that you'll be able to, be friends with for the rest of your life. So,
well, I think I was going to go a different direction, but since we're talking kids real quick, I might we'll hit that super quick, and obviously I want to get to Mind Pump Media, but Sal, I know you've put out some content about this exact topic. And so just for context, how many kids do you have?
I have four kids.
Okay. And what's the youngest age?
So the youngest is 2. So I have,
so you're still in it.
Yeah, I'm still in it. So I have 2 older ones from I'm in my second marriage. So I have 2 older ones, 2 younger ones. So there's a gap between the first 2 and the second 2. I know it's interesting because my 2 older ones are 19 and 15, and then it goes 4 and 2. And because I have that age gap, I have this unique. I feel like it's a blessing. I experienced it once, and then it's like, I remember my mom telling me how much better it was being a grandmother than a mother. And she said, it's because you go through it and then you realize it goes by so quick that when you become a grandparent, you really soak it in. You're really trying to be as present as possible. And I almost feel like I got that experience because of the gap between the two, because it is so chaotic. It's so insane, and everything gets thrown out the window, and your schedule, your whatever you were doing before, like forget about it. Like these are the most important things in the world, and then it's gone, and it's gone so fast, and then you're like, okay, I wish I could do that again, and I got the opportunity to. So,
Man, that is such a cool perspective. I've never thought of it like that, because yes, you got to go back and redo it with all of that context now, and like that you basically get a do-over with that new insight. I mean, can you imagine that? Because in the moment, and we're in it, it gets chaotic, and everyone, it's so cliche. Oh, you're gonna miss these days, and when they're little and running around, and and you're like, yeah, I got it. I it's not like I don't believe them. But I'm sure there's an age, or maybe they hit 11 or 12, where those days are, definitely over, and they don't want to snuggle you anymore and all those things. And then, so you got to go back and run through it again with your last two kids. Obviously, I'm sure you grew a lot as a man in that time period too. Were there any major, differences you had in how you raised them? We're like, all right, the first time I did that, I screwed that up. And like, I guess any key takeaways having come through it again?
Oh my gosh, man. I mean, I'm a lot wiser of a father now. I was so focused. I took what the world told me my value was as a father, and I thought that was work. I go to work and I earn a living, and I worked a lot, and I missed a lot of things with them because I thought that was my value. Go to work, earn a living, come home, play with my kids. Second time around, you know your kids by taking care of them. Playing with them is very important. Don't get me wrong. Playing with your kids, and the data on this is actually quite remarkable on the importance of playing with your children, especially fathers. We play with our children differently than mothers tend to. We play a little bit more rough. We teach our kids boundaries. We teach our daughters what safe touch is versus unsafe touch. The rough housing, the risk taking, that's what fathers do through play. But then there's the like changing diapers, feeding them, bathing them, being with them otherwise. And you just get to, your kids. And it's also just being present, with my first two, when I was with them, unless I was actively playing with them, my mind was with my work. Okay. What am I going to do with my business? How am I going to grow it? How am I going to, meet with new clients? And you miss so much. And so second time around, it's just, I'm far more conscious of all of that. I mean, this just happened the other day with my 15-year-old. I'm bringing her to school, and she's trying to listen to her music, and I'm like, hey, let's take your music off. Let's hang out a little bit. No, I really want to listen to my music. So I remember when I couldn't get her to when she just wanted to hang out with me, and now getting her to want to hang out with me is like, I got to figure out creative ways to get my 15-year-old to want to sit down with dad. So it does go by very quickly, but I just a lot wiser with the whole thing. And then also just realizing that the world has done a terrible disservice to men and fathers, has really lied to us about, it wasn't that long ago. It was a few generations ago where a man would brag. Like one of the ways we would brag and find pride was in how many kids we had. And the fact that we were fathers. And today you see a lot of this like, oh, you're married, you got kids. Oh, life sucks, right? It's real hard. Oh, you got the ball and chain type of deal. No, that's what it's all about. It's like you grow up, you become a man, and you have these kids, and it's so much. It's so much of what life is all about. And then we mentioned this earlier, the struggle of it. But this applies to, in my experience, and I know you guys know this because I know a little of your history. You think back of all the challenging times of building a business, or the challenging times of, any kind of accomplishment. And in that moment of challenge, you're like, man, this is really rough. And then you get through it. Looking back, fond. It's all fun. Like, oh man, remember when we built I think about Mind Pump when we first started Mind Pump, and we had this tiny little hole in the wall studio, and we're trying to figure out how to turn this into a business, and we weren't making any money at the time. And you know what? When I think back, those were the best memories. So, just a reminder to all the people listening right now, like the struggle, that's what you're gonna look back on. It's not the like, yay, I hit the finish line. It's like, oh man, when I was going through that tough time and I made it, like that's the value right there.
Yeah. And the irony of all that is, I think the harder the struggle was, the more rewarding it is at the end.
Always.
Right. it's kind of like that cold beer you have after a long day, like doing yard work. Like you get perspective from that, right? And that's a silly example, but if you've been hard charging at something for 8 to 10 years, and it finally bears fruit, that perspective is so much more powerful. Sal, I'm curious with you. Not only do you have a different perspective, just because you grew as a man, right, and had 2 more kids in a slightly different phase of your life, but also I'm curious, technology and all these other things evolved in that time period that I would imagine presents different parenting challenges. Like TikTok wasn't around and Instagram really wasn't, you know what I mean? And now, mine's only 3.5 now, so I don't have to worry about this yet, but I'm already worried about when she's like 12 and she wants to get like a TikTok account, right? And all this crap that, the kids can get exposed to, especially young girls, because I think that can mess with their self-esteem and all these things. So, tablets, the YouTube, all these things that, they get addicted to it. So have you, have you adapted to that, in your parenting style? Cause it is hard. Like I think most of us, maybe you don't, Tony, cause you're a little bit more granola than me, but I have a tablet at the house and I have to use it sometimes because sometimes, when I'm by myself, I got to get some stuff done. Even if it's just doing the dishes and like folding laundry, like I can't be playing all the time. So I have to throw the tablet at her and let her watch some, Peppa Pig for a little while, right? It is what it is. But it can be a crutch because then maybe you have a rough day at work.
Yeah.
I need 30 minutes to just decompress. And it's like, all right, take the tablet, but that is a crutch, right? Like I should just man up and like push through. So curious how you're dealing with kind of the modern challenges of parenting.
We'll get into the data because the data on this we now have data on all of this, which we didn't necessarily have, 19 years ago with my first. But I'll use an analogy that I think you guys will get because you're both fitness guys, right? So health and fitness guys. If you are not careful with your children in creating boundaries and structures around diet and activity, then your child the odds are they will end up sick and obese with chronic pain and chronic illness. That's the majority, right? So in other words, if they follow the world from a health and fitness perspective, the odds are they're going to be sick, fat, and unhealthy, okay? This is true mentally and spiritually as well. And the data now is quite clear on this. Okay, so why am I saying this? Because the biggest pushback that you'll get from parents or even yourself, you'll think this yourself, is like, man, they're going to be so different from their friends. All their friends are using their smartphones. All their friends are communicating through these apps. That's the point. The point is to not have them be like everybody else, because everybody else, the data on this now is quite clear. The mental health epidemic in kids is astonishing. It's remarkably astonishing. Kids are more anxious, more depressed, more lost and lonely than ever. And it's precisely because we're allowing our kids to regulate with technology. So now I'll get into the science of it, right? So when a child, especially when they're little, they don't have the ability to learn. They don't have the ability to regulate their emotions. That's why they throw temper tantrums. It's almost like they're having a seizure. In fact, I had, Erica Komisar on the podcast recently, and she's an expert on this. And she used a great analogy. She said, imagine your kid has a seizure. You're going to go over and be next to them and make sure that they're okay. He goes, when your kid has a temper tantrum, it's an emotional seizure. They don't have the ability to regulate. And so the way that they regulate is they co-regulate with their parent. So this is how they learn how to regulate important emotions. Now, when you put a device in front of them, which is engineered to be distracting, very powerfully so. This is not the TV that we grew up watching. This is really, really expertly engineered technology. What they're actually learning to do is disassociate. Okay, so they're learning how to disassociate from the emotional storm that they have. And what we're doing is we're raising fragile children. So these kids are not learning the skills of emotional regulation. And then they go to high school and college, they need a cry closet, or they freak out over, things that you're like, why are you, acting that way when it's like this minor challenge? Well, they never develop these important skills. So where am I going with this? It's hard, but you have to be, you wouldn't put your little kids around candy and expect them to self-regulate their eating. That's just not wise as a parent. Like I could do that. You could put a candy around me by the way, most adults will have a difficult time with this as well, but you could put me around a lot of candy and I have the skills to not eat certain things and avoid certain things for my health. You can't do that with a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old. They're just going to eat as much as they want or as much as they can, get sick, whatever. They don't have those skills. So when it comes to technology, you have to be very diligent and create incredible boundaries. Now the data, we finally have data to support this. You mentioned having, young girls. The body image issues that girls are developing and the self-esteem issues that they're developing by looking at social media, it was already difficult to begin with. Media already makes it difficult for both boys and girls, but especially for girls. But when girls are scrolling through social media, your brain doesn't know how to decipher between what you see on your phone and the real world. So what ends up happening is if I'm scrolling through and seeing perfect body, perfect clothes, good-looking person, whatever, my brain believes this is what I'm surrounded by. It's literally no different than if the three of us grew up in the NBA and that's all we saw. So we're surrounded by 7-foot tall people. I'm 6 foot tall. I would feel like I'm just really short. The reality is it's not true. So these girls are looking at all this and their brain is perceiving them as not, having a great life, not having enough money, not being attractive, and so without them realizing it, they're developing this distorted self-image. So my 15-year-old is a good example of this. She has literally a 5-minute time limit on social media on her phone at 15. And this is a constant struggle for us. She brings it up every so often. All my friends are on there. All my friends use, all these different apps. I can't communicate with them. And it's like, honey, look, I know. That's the point. The point is I don't want you to be like everybody else. And sometimes I'm your friend and sometimes I'm your dad. And right now I'm going to be your dad. And so that's it. She doesn't have access to those things. And I don't think I'm going to give her access until she's maybe a senior in high school or older. And that's not the norm. So that's where I'm at now. My younger ones, it's even more strict. They get 30 minutes total of electronic or TV time a day, and then what they watch is very, very carefully filtered. My wife, thankfully, is so exceptional at this. She's very good at researching what kind of media can cause, is distractible. For example, Mr. Rogers. This is an old TV show when I was a kid. Is great. You watched Mr. Rogers today because we're all used to what media looks like now, and you're going to be like, this is painfully slow. I can't even believe kids used to watch this. That was the point. So we're very, very meticulous. We have a timer at home. We put it up on a ledge. My son knows, my 4-year-old knows that how much time, Dad, can I watch TV? Yeah, how much time you want? 10 minutes. And I take it off the timer. He gets, okay, you have 20 minutes left. When that 30 minutes is done, it's done. He gets no more. And we're going to probably keep it like that for a very, very long time. So some people might say I'm alarmist. I have the data now to support it. So that's just where I'm at now. And again, the whole point is to not let them be like everybody else. Unfortunately, it's tough, but that's just, by the way, a strategy that helps with that. This has helped us tremendously. Is to surround yourself with parents who have kids who are like-minded. Otherwise, it's very, very isolating. You feel very isolated if you don't have those people around you.
Yeah, I think a quote that comes to mind, because I can just tell already you and I are very value aligned on how we approach that. But a quote that comes to mind is, it's not an accomplishment to be well adapted to a sick society. And I think that sums up what you just said perfectly, that and I will openly admit, my wife and I, same thing. We have a 30-minute limit. We have particular shows that we let them watch, but then even the food choices at their schools, we've had some parents or even the teachers at times be like, and I mean, they eat what we eat, meaning my 2.5-year-old loves, she'll take to school steak, potatoes with some blueberries. And now what we also do is that, if we're at a friend's house and there happens to be something that we typically wouldn't give them and they want it, we're going to give it to them, because what we don't want is them fearing food. So it's hey, our house is our house. We're going to control to a certain degree. And we have some, we'll get Siete potato chips every once in a while, which are made with at least better ingredients. And of course they're going to have some of those, but the options for them at our house, we do keep under kind of our value system of how we approach eating. But when they're at other places, like I said, I don't want them saying like, no, you can't eat that. It's like, hey, if we're with your grandparents and they want to get you ice cream, go do it. It's going to be once every 3 or 4 months.
Can I comment on that? Because you're saying something that's really, really valuable. And it's important that we mention that, because on the flip side, what you don't want to do, and this was a mistake I made with my older two, which actually caused some disordered eating issues with my 15-year-old that we had to battle through. What you got to remember is that these kids are going to grow up in a world where there's an infinite amount of choices of food that they're surrounded by. So you also simultaneously don't want to raise them in a way to where they're afraid of food and it's hyper restrictive. Like, no, you can't eat that. You have to eat this type of deal, because then it can go in the opposite direction and you can see disordered eating behaviors start to develop. So what you're saying is so valuable. So what we do is we give our kids 4 or 5 options, and we know one of them they like. Like, we'll put one of them that we know for sure they like melon, like watermelon or blueberries or something like that, something that they like. And then we'll give them 2 that we know they'll eat for the most part. Sometimes they won't. And then we'll give them something new that maybe we want them to experiment with. And then we let them choose so that they have the feeling of autonomy, so that they don't feel like they're being so restricted and controlled, because it can also go in the opposite direction, like you said. And then the same thing, if they're over at someone's house, they want to have something, it's not a big deal. Go ahead and enjoy yourself, because at some point they're going to be navigating the world, and you don't want, because you'll see this sometimes with the lack of a better term, the hyper health conscious, maybe restrictive households, is this pendulum swing in the opposite direction when they go off to college, or they'll develop things like anorexia or orthorexia, which is quite common in the fitness space. So really, really important that you brought that up to balance out this conversation, because you see that so often in our space where it goes too far in the other direction, and then they get real, like I said, orthorexia being the most common thing.
Yeah, and I think that I love that you have kind of the data and even the personal experience to kind of add some color to that, because that's where, of course, we're newer to the game, where you've been doing this for 19 years, but like, to me, and I'm grateful. My parents actually were very much, even though I don't know, it wasn't my mom, it was maybe more of a conscious thing. They were very much kind of in line with what now we realize could at least be something that could benefit a broader audience. But yeah, it's just, and even Bear, it's wild though, because Bear calling me granola, I know Bear through and through. Like, I know what he means by that, but it is fascinating to me that like having any type of like structure or kind of boundaries within this space, you're looked at as like a weirdo. And it's like, my wife, we just simply don't care. I've been doing this for 2 decades. Like, I've always been the weird one, even with the water I drink and what I choose to put in my body. And even from a spiritual sense, kind of my ideology surrounding that has always been a little different than what the average person would think. So I actually look at that as endearing. But I do see, and you said it, like, I see that scare other parents into like, well, I don't want my kid being the one eating like food, like real food in lunch. It's like, well, so you'd rather give them a Lunchable instead of giving them food that actually, if at a young age they're exposed to, they'll learn to enjoy. Now, of course, the other stuff that they'll like as well. But yeah, just appreciate your kind of perspective and your wisdom, having done that for 19 years and then had some ability to adjust.
Look, one last thing I'll add to that is, because this is a really important topic. I think a very important topic, especially for the people that lead their families. We live in a world that is remarkably effective. I mean, we live in market-based societies, which are great, but markets are really good at giving us what we want. That's what they do. They don't give us what we need. They give us what we want. And so we live in a world that is basically all of your earthly, fleshly, animal desires can be met. Look at the top selling foods in the health category. Forget the like crappy food category. Look at the wellness and health and fitness categories of food. The top sellers are the most palatable. They're not the healthiest. It's the tastiest, because that's what people want. It's the fastest, most convenient, tastiest. And so we live in this world where entertainment is about meeting those desires. It's about being as sedentary as possible, because movement takes effort. It's about distractibility. It's about making things easy, and distracting us from any, sort of challenge. And where does that leave us? Mentally unhealthy, physically unhealthy, and spiritually unhealthy. We're in a crisis of poor health. We've solved the acute health problems, which we solved 50 years ago. Congratulations. You get an infection now. We have great solutions. You break a bone, like, we're in good hands. Everything else is terrible. So, again, people are like, oh, that's going to be hard. I don't know if there's a way to do this where it's not hard. I think that's kind of baked into, even psychologists will tell you this. Like, there has to be an element of struggle for us to feel happy. I personally don't think you'll find those answers in Western medicine. I think those answers have been pondered for thousands of years in spiritual practices, and what they'll tell you is that challenge is important, and you have to go through it. And so, okay, so again, to kind of wrap this up, you're going to be different. You're not going to be like everybody else. You're going to be weird. Do you want to be like everyone else? Again, look at the data. No, I don't. I don't want to be like everybody else. I don't want my kids to to meet every women desire with technology and pornography and terrible food and sedentary lifestyle, because it doesn't make you happier, everybody. It just makes things, I don't know, faster, but you're not happier. So I guess that's the point of it all.
And I think you start to, I love what you said about the good, the bad, like the spectrum of polarity. And I'm going to insert some of my own belief, but I think you would be able to kind of have your own flavor to it as well. Is that mechanism is actually what I think is the soul is here to do, is experience that polarity of spectrum to better understand itself. And I think without the good and bad, that understanding is null. And that's what I think we're doing, is like we're trying to remove the highs and lows, but then you just get almost a numbness. And there is a convenience to that. But what happens is there's almost an energetic vacuuming that happens where you almost dehumanize in a way, and you forget the innate essence that I think is within each of us. And then all of a sudden you become almost at the whim of, like you said, like markets in kind of even look at, like in the US, like a capitalist society is a healthy thing. But if there aren't values or ideals that underline that, we can end up in a really tricky place really quick, because then it's just, we are literally quite in almost like Matrix in a way of like, we're just at the whim of what these valueless or like these companies lacking ideals are just trying to commoditize your energy systems, whether that's with what you're eating or with what you're watching.
They're doing exactly what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Which is give us what we ask them to do. And that's what you want. You don't want companies to try and give you what they think you need, because that goes bad faster than what we're experiencing now. But you're right. We have to have a strong value system. Otherwise, we're going to choose what our animal instincts, or what I believe the flesh wants. I'm a Christian, and the Christian faith teaches us that we're broken, that we can't do this without God's guidance. And I believe that to be 100% true. But even if you're secular, what makes us different than animals is the difference between getting everything you want and getting what you need. Like, eat everything you want. Watch what happens, right? Move as much as you feel. Watch what happens. Consume what you desire all the time and watch what happens. We now have the data to support all that. So you have to have that value system. Again, I don't think I need to make this point. Look where we're at. We have more material goods, more food, more shelter, more everything, more entertainment. We're more anxious, more stressed, more depressed, more sick than ever. So here we are. There's your evidence, whether you agree with the spiritual component or not. What are we gonna do with this now? I do think that we have the answers. I think a lot of them lie in the space that we all work in, by the way. I think, I know we all work in the health, wellness, fitness, whatever sphere you want to label it, but really it's the personal growth sphere, if you really want to label it properly. If you look at it like a person who's pursued health and fitness for longer than 10 or 15 years, I mean, first it's like, I want to look jacked, and then it's, I want to perform better, and then it's, I don't want to hurt anymore, and then it's, ooh, this makes me feel better, and ooh, this lifts my mood, and it's like, well, there's more to this than just that. And let me figure out my sleep, let me figure out my diet, let me figure out my spiritual health, let me figure out how to be a better person. I think we have the answers. I think it's important we communicate them properly. Our job really is to sell it better than everybody else. I'll give you guys a great example of what I'm talking about. I just read this data recently, and I thought it was absolutely fascinating. I just mentioned I'm a Christian, and so I've been looking at data to support a lot of the Christian practices and traditions, which, by the way, many of them are echoed in other spiritual practices. I do believe that there's spiritual truth that you'll find echoed across a wide spectrum. And one of the truths that you see in pretty much every spiritual practice is that that many of them communicate charity, helping others or giving to others. Well, I found some very fascinating data that supports this, these thousands of year old practices. So once you meet, and we'll talk about material goods or money. Let's talk about money. Once you meet your needs, anything above that. So let's say you have all your needs. I got my house, I got my food taken care of, but I want to keep making more money. And if you boil it all down to why do you want to make more money? You boil it all down as to become happier, right? Well, I want to buy a new car. I want to get why? It's to become happier. So let's look at that for a second. If you use your money to purchase things, even experiences or things for yourself, let's just label it things for yourself. The data shows that your happiness goes up for about 5 to 14 days, and then it starts to drop off. Okay, after it starts to drop off quite quickly. If you repeat that same activity, the novelty effect starts to wear off. So I buy a new car, I'm excited about it. Happiness starts to go down. If I buy that same car again, like it's not going to happen again. So I need new novelty every time it's like a drug. I got to keep creating novelty to spike up happiness, and each time it drops down. If I take that same money and through the goodness of my own heart, in other words, I'm not forced. So this is not like someone's forcing me. I have to do this out of my own will. If I use that same money to help somebody or to give to charity, my happiness never goes away. Every time I think about that charitable action, my happiness goes up. Here's the second part that's pretty amazing. There is no novelty effect. I can repeat that same action over and over and over again, and I will keep building upon that joy that I feel from giving. So here's how you sell it. The most cost-effective way to improve your happiness is to give your money away or use it to help somebody else. And that's the data. That's the data. How remarkable is that we now have data supporting what people have been saying?
And I think you can expand that outside of money too. Money is a great for what you're laying out here. Money is a great, like, very particular reason, but I even view the energy you give to people, and I don't mean that in a woo-woo sense. I just mean over delivering both
Totally.
on your daily, and then zoom that out over a year. If that's an ideal and a value that you hold, and of course it'd be very anecdotal for me to sit here and be like, based off my experience, but it's undeniable once you realize that, like, whoa, instead of being stingy and thinking of like, what's the world have to give to me? What do these individuals have to give to me? And you just over deliver all the time, the reciprocation that happens is magical. And there's where you can get into however your belief system or the God, I know Christianity for you, however you kind of frame that up for yourself, like, that's where magic starts to happen. And those little moments then build, I think, a spiritual backbone where it's like, oh, this is kind of it's magical to be human. It's magical to be on this earth. And I love what you said, because you just gave a very particular example that shows in the data. But like, if you experience that firsthand, it becomes undeniable. Then once you have those experiences, it's undeniable.
Yes. And my friend Bishop Barron, he's a Catholic bishop he was instrumental in my faith about 6 years ago. He called it spiritual physics. The more you give, the more you fill up. Now, here's the crazy part, and this is where it just gives me the chills to even think about this. Evolution can explain quite a bit of our behaviors. It can't explain that. It makes zero evolutionary sense for me to feel more joy from giving to other people than from taking care of myself. If that's not evidence of a greater power, I don't know what is, because it literally makes evolutionarily speaking, I should be happiest taking care of me. Me. It should make zero sense that taking my time and my money and using it for others fills me up and I have no novelty effect. I mean, isn't that remarkable?
That's so spot on. What you said really resonates with me. And the new car example is a great example. You get a new car, you're all excited, it smells new. After a month, it's the new norm. You don't even think about it anymore. With the giving, and I'll just give you a quick example, Sal, something we just did that 100% validated this, but we did a big campaign on Veterans Day, and we were ultimately able to pay off $11 million of veteran medical bills.
Wow.
We donated, tons of the profits, and the initial goal was to do $5 million in total. And the thing just went crazy. So we ended up more than doubling it, ended up at about 11 million. But early on in the process, when we started paying off these bills, we started getting these people were reaching out to us saying, like, basically, holy shit, like, this is unreal. You're changing my life. And I got on the phone with a few of them and just basically told them, hey, this isn't a hoax. Like, it's good. You're good to go. And, like, you're hearing it from me. And was able to kind of learn some of their circumstances and kind of how this was going to change their life. And then it's not like I wasn't emotionally invested before. This was a marketing thing we wanted to do. Every Veterans Day, we do it to give back to veterans. We do something around this, but this was our biggest thing by far. But once we got the personal stories and you learned about the actual impact, like the girl in Texas, her debt was only like 11 grand. And she was like, you don't understand, this will change my life. We had a Marine, his was $182,000. He was paralyzed for a while, single father of 3. And he was like, and then another guy sent us a letter, Sean. I think he's in some kind of rehab facility right now, but basically said, hey, this like saved my life. And you don't know this, Tony. We're sending him $2,000 worth of gear he's going to get right before Christmas.
Love it.
So what I'm getting at is what you said is 100% valid, because what was initially just a concept, once it became personal, it was like, we're hooked now, and we're doing it next year, and we're going to make it way bigger, because that is so, in a way, it's self-serving to yourself. Like, that's what people don't understand. Is like, yeah, guys, we're being generous, but you don't understand what this does for us, and it fills our hearts up too. And I love, I don't know where you got the data, but the fact that, there's no diminishment, and that stays in perpetuity, is such a cool thing to like grab onto, because all those other things are surface level. And even as you get more financially wealthy, and you elevate your lifestyle, there's also a diminishing return to those upgrades, right? It's totally funny. Like, you start flying first class. It's super cool for the first couple months, but then it's just normal, and you're just in an airplane seat. Like, it's not really, you know what I mean? It's okay. So that's the new normal. So what do you need to fly private now? And then that becomes normal, I'm sure, for people. I'm not doing that yet, but hopefully maybe someday. But all these little upgrades you think are going to unlock this happiness, it's very temporary. And that's why you need to focus on more substantial things that actually have a foundation to them. And I think the notion of giving back, whether it's a financial way, and obviously, through the church, like they preach that a lot. And that was actually the sermon a couple weeks ago for me, which was really cool. But in other ways, volunteering at a food shelter, or coaching high school football, volunteer, whatever it is, your version of giving back ends up being a 10x on that return. So I love the way you inserted data into that, because I had never thought about that. I just kind of thought, I thought of it, but it's fascinating, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Look at the look on your face while you're talking about this. That's not going to change 15 years from now when you talk about it again, or you just think about it. What I try to do is I try to take things that I think are valuable and find effective ways to sell them to people so that they can experience it themselves. Because you could say to somebody, oh, it feels great, it's a good thing, and they might believe it, they might not. A lot of people are convinced with data. And so I tell people, with that particular thing, like, it literally is. But this is not just this. Lots of studies on this. This isn't one study. This is well studied. It is the most cost-effective way to improve your happiness. It's better than investing in using that money on anything else. If you want to feel happier, use it for someone else out of the goodness of and again, it has to be something that you do voluntarily, that you want to do. Because again, the data also shows that if I force you, it doesn't do that. So if I tax you and give it to somebody, or hold a gun to your head and make you do it, it's not the same thing. It has to be something that you choose to do. But hey, God bless you guys for doing that. That's amazing.
When I think in here, I won't completely sidebar us, but there's a deeper conversation here. And even as somebody who doesn't identify as a Christian, I've studied the Christian faith and hold it in high regard. I just have kind of a broader, I've kind of piecemealed what my cosmetology and ideology kind of looks like, but certainly there are Christian principles as a part of that. And there's one principle I laugh all the time is like, you could spend a whole lifetime on love thy neighbor as thyself. Like that alone right there. And I think what you're getting at is, or what we're getting at is that when you view the world, when you're able to give to the world in a way that you're less identified with yourself and your sense of self, you actually realize there's a connectivity. And I love it. Sounds like a spiritual mentor put it in a way that is similar to the framework I have in my mind of like, there is a spiritual physics, or I do think eventually quantum physics is going to get to here that like that reciprocation that happens, there actually is a mechanism happening there. And like, it's when the sense of self starts to dissolve into a broader sense of oneness, that actually that give and take, like if you're an energetic leech from people, you are creating almost a boomerang effect for your energetic system too, but it happens in the opposite sense of what you're describing of the goodness. And to me it rings like the saying of like loving your neighbor as yourself. That on surface level, you could be like, yeah, you should treat your neighbors good. It's like, no, understand that your neighbor is thyself, and that anything you're doing to others, both personally or in a group or in this case, in a charitable sense, you quite literally are doing that to yourself, which I think is that boomerang that's actually happening when you're doing charitable acts.
Completely, 100%. And, just a personal experience, I'm not, and this is actually a struggle for me that I've worked on, but I'm not very good at exhibiting certain emotions, and there's a long story behind that. But difficult emotions for me, I tend to block them out or whatever. Bit of a dissociative issue that I have, but I'll get tearful doing stuff like that. I mean, it happened the other day. Our studio here is next to there's a church right. It's not the one I attend, but there's a church next to us, and there was a person sleeping on the steps, and I walked up to this woman, I tapped her on the shoulder. And I said, hey, do you need any help? And she says, yeah, please, I'd love some help. And then I said, hey, do you mind if I pray for you? And, we could pray together. And she said, yeah, I would love that. And I said, what would you like me to pray for? A blanket. She asked for a blanket. I mean, and it got me, even now I get choked up. Like, here I am, we could pray for anything. She wants a blanket. She's not asking for a house. She's not I'd like to cover myself because it's a little cold outside. It's remarkable when you reach outside yourself, how much your perspective changes. And then again, I'm going to sell it. You want to feel joy. By the way, joy is not happiness. Joy it supersedes. You can feel joyful and be in pain. You can feel joyful and be exhausted and stressed out. You can feel joyful and be in difficult situations. It's a very different feeling than happiness. It is something so much more powerful. And you want to feel real joy. Try it. Listen, if you're listening to this right now, go do something for somebody else out of the goodness of your heart. Watch what happens. It'll blow you away, and it's amazing. It's addicting.
So cool. Well, this went a direction I was not expecting, but I'm loving it. I really appreciate this. I do want to get into Mind Pump Media a little bit.
Let's do it.
And so we covered out on that, but I mean, from the parenting side to the faith to the giving, I mean, all this is hitting home for me. So just, I guess, talk to us about Mind Pump Media, like how it started. I love the founder story. That's our story too. So I'm sure you were in the trenches in the early years, like slugging it out. But tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so I started in the fitness space real young. As soon as I could become a personal trainer, I walked into a gym and became one, and absolutely fell in love with the gym. I mean, I love the gym. I love training people. I love working with people. And I did that for a while till I started managing gyms. So about 19 and a half, I was a general manager of a big box gym. By the time I was 22, I owned my own studio, and it was like a wellness studio. So we had personal training, gut and hormone testing. I had body work specialists and their acupuncturists. And the idea was to kind of have this complete space for wellness. Now, at the time, I was definitely a meathead trainer, so I understood strength training and I understood macros, but that was about it. But thankfully, I was by accident or smart enough to be surrounded by people who offered different modalities outside of what I did in my facility. And what's the blessing of that was I was able to learn just through osmosis by being surrounded by these incredible practitioners. And so I got to learn a lot about different aspects of health and wellness because I could see the value that they brought to their clients. And then at one point to me, as I went through some of my own kind of health challenges. So that's the kind of the backstory. While doing that, one of my clients, who's now our producer, approached me, Doug, who you guys know, you'll hear him on the podcast sometimes. He approached me and he said, "Hey, if you ever want to sell anything online, I have a little bit of online marketing experience. I'd love to put something together for you." And so I created the first workout program, one of the ones we still sell, MAPS Anabolic. And we put together some marketing material. Now, at this time, I had been in contact with Adam Schaefer, who's my co-host on the podcast. Now, I didn't really know him. I knew of him over the previous years. At least 5 separate occasions, people would approach me and say, "Hey, do you know Adam Schaefer?" And I'd say no, and they'd say, "You should really meet him. You guys should work together." And it was really weird by the 3rd or 4th time, like, okay, who's this guy everybody says I need to work with? I had no idea the same thing was happening to him. People would approach him and say the same thing. So I knew of this guy, but I'd never really hung out with him or met him. Anyway, we were in contact on social media through unrelated topics. Doug and I had created some marketing material, and I remembered Adam, and I thought, I'm going to ask his opinion. A lot of people say, he knows his stuff. He seems like a smart guy. So I messaged him on Facebook and said, "Hey, I put together this marketing material for a workout program. I'd love your opinion." He said, "Sure, I'll take a look at it." So I sent it over to him. He said, "Let's get on the phone." We got on the phone, and there was chemistry right out the gates. We're going back and forth. And he's like, "Hey, come over to my house tonight. I'd love you to meet my partner, Justin." At the time, him and Justin, who's my other co-host, were developing a fitness app. And we thought we'd all get in the same room. So I went over his house that evening, and it was a 4-hour conversation. I mean, right out the gates. It was like everything that's wrong with the fitness industry, what we would like to see changed, why we love it, why we hate it. And we decided that starting a podcast would be a great idea, mainly because podcasting is long form. I think it's pretty much impossible to communicate fitness properly through an Instagram post. It's a conversation. If you've ever trained clients for any longer than a few years, you know that it's an ongoing coaching process. I can't communicate effectively at all, except for maybe in a book, or definitely over a prolonged period of time through conversations. And of course, podcasting had very low barriers to enter. If you have equipment, you can throw up a podcast. We didn't need sponsors, so we could say what we felt. And at the time, if before new media, if you didn't sell products or supplements, like, good luck getting your voice out there. But we great timing. I could say whatever I want. I could tell people most supplements suck or waste the money. I could tell people the truth. And so we started Mind Pump, and it took off. I mean, no media experience. We're terrible podcasters, but we all had 20 years of experience training people. And so that's what you heard in those early days. And I remember we launched the podcast with 5 episodes. About 2 weeks in, I'm training clients in my studio, and my phone is going off. And it's Adam, and he's trying to call me, and I'm skipping the voicemail because I'm with a client. He calls me back 4 times, right? He calls me, keeps calling me. So I'm like, this must be an emergency. So I tell my client, let me take this call. There might be an emergency going on. I go outside, answer the phone, and it's Adam. He's like, "Check iTunes right now. Go on the top charts or whatever." So I'm like, okay. I go on there, and there's Mind Pump. We had made it to their new and notable, and it was like, oh, okay, I think we got something here. And that was kind of the beginning of the whole thing, and sold my studio, and we did this full time. About a year later, we monetized, and that was it. That was the beginning of the whole thing. And now we sell workout programs. Obviously, we have sponsors on the show. We do online coaching courses, and all that. But that was the beginning of the whole thing, and it really started with this idea that we wanted to communicate fitness the right way. We wanted to change the direction of the space by showing people that you could do it the right way, that it doesn't have to be body focused, doesn't have to be body obsessed, that you don't have to lie and be, whatever. Like, I'll give you an example. We've never used a before and after picture to sell a fitness program, to the dismay of our marketing team, which absolutely hates that we won't let them use a before and after, because today it still is the most effective way. If you want to sell something in fitness, show somebody who's out of shape, get in shape in 60 days, and you'll sell more than anything else. But we refuse to do that because it's just the wrong message. And we've stuck to our guns. And over the last decade, it's been a nice, consistent growth. And I think we've proven, or we're proving that you can do this the right way, build a successful, long-lasting business in fitness while maintaining integrity. And so that's where we're at now.
Well, I'm going to give you a very loaded question just to see where you go with it.
Okay.
We're coming up on time here, and I just want to.
Well, I think what we should do, is Sal, if you're open to it, I would love to get you back, and because we do talk a ton of like actual human performance, but we go all over the place, which we did today. So I would love, so that we don't rush. Of course, the question you're gonna ask, you can still ask, but like we can almost just shelve all the other stuff and potentially do a follow up where we get more into the actual like human performance, diet, kind of fat loss side of things, which I know you're an expert in.
Oh, love it. And I don't think I have a hard stop if you guys want to go a little longer, which is totally fine too.
Okay. I was just going to say that to boil down everything you've done in that space, this will be hard for you to probably narrow this down because you probably have a long list, but what would be your top 3 takeaways over the last, however many years you've been doing this, as far as someone maximizing their vitality and being healthy, whether it's fitness to nutrition and any of the other practices that you were exposed to that you endorse? If you had to give a top 3, boil it all down, what would you say?
I have a fitness quote that I think boils it down, and I actually borrowed it from one of my heroes. I'm actually wearing a shirt with his picture on, Milton Friedman. He's an economic, I know this has nothing to do with fitness, but he has this quote where he says, sacrificing liberty for safety, you'll end up with very little of either. If you chase aesthetics, you'll lose your health, and you'll get when you're unhealthy, you'll lose the aesthetics. If you chase health, you'll get healthier, and the aesthetics follow. So that would be one thing. So, and the reason why, again, I try to sell this, right? Most people get into fitness because they want to look better, but the best approach is to be healthier, more mobile, and more fit, and then you'll get the look. If you just chase the look, you end up sacrificing your health. You end up sacrificing your mobility, and when you lose your health, then the aesthetics are gone. So that would be one of them. The other one is you have to approach this from a point of self-care or self-love, and I'll define that real quick. It's not the feeling, it's not the fuzzy feeling of love, it's the like actual action of love. If you go to the gym, if you feed yourself, if you care for yourself like somebody you care about, then you're going to do great. You're going to go great. You're going to go far. This will be something you enjoy. Workouts won't be a punishment. They'll be self-care. Eating won't be restrictive. It'll be nourishing. Balance is baked into it. Sometimes taking care of yourself means having pizza and beer with your buddies. Sometimes taking care of yourself means skipping the gym. So it's all baked in. So if you do this from a point of self-care, then you're going to do very, very well. If you do it from a place of self-hate, which is where most people start, I'm fat, I'm ugly, I don't deserve whatever, then gym is a punishment, diet is restrictive, then you're going to experience the ups and downs, the in and out, the pendulum swing, and this will never be something that you truly enjoy. And then lastly, I'll say this, that from an efficiency standpoint, and I'll give you a little context, most people are not going to become fitness fanatics like us. So we need to accept that as leaders in the space. Most people don't, working out is not like their favorite thing to do. They do it to improve the quality of your life. The most we can expect from the average person for the rest of their life is probably 2 or 3 structured workouts a week. Okay, that's it. Like, we got to stop trying to get people to work out structured workouts every single day. It's not going to happen. We're setting people up for failure. Average person, I think we can get them to do 2 or 3 structured workouts. That doesn't mean you're not active the other days, but just structured workouts a week. The best, most effective, protective form of exercise within that context is strength training. So Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Smith, has got a regular, job, mortgage, kids, who, wants to get the most, the biggest bang for his buck, speed up his metabolism, affect his metabolic health, improve his mobility, protect against a sedentary lifestyle. Strength train. That's the most effective form. Start there. That's the foundation. Then you can add on top of that.
Love that.
Yeah, and I love your second point is something I opened up about on a podcast the other day, and I think, Sal, you've talked on it too. So I'd love to get just before we sign off your thoughts on it, because I think it's really important, and I think it's often overlooked. Is that I was talking to Bear about we had done a recap on the year and some things we wrestled with on a personal level. And for me, I framed it as like the stories we tell ourselves. I had a very weird story, or not a weird, just like a very kind of self-detrimental story surrounding, I was 6'5" when I was 12 years old, 6'5",
Wow.
140 pounds. So rail thin, thank God I was pretty athletic, but my dad and brother would always joke about how skinny I was. And of course they like any guy should do, like it was banter. It's not like they were abusing me, but like I internalized the story that I realized later in my 20s that like, hey, that story, that built an insecurity and a story where although you love working out, there's this subtle story running in the background that like you're too skinny and you need to put on more muscle and you need to eat more. And I told Bear, like, it was something I've been aware of it for a while, but I really got in there this year and started to kind of, what I said, like rewrite the code on that and say like, hey, that was the 11 or 12-year-old version of yourself. Like, you don't feel that way anymore, and you don't need to throttle yourself in the gym, and you don't need to overeat in order to try to satiate this thing that was from when you were a kid that you internalized that wasn't even their intention either. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because I think it relates to that second principle you just said. And then I think you have been open about some similar things in your past.
Yeah, I still struggle with it. That's a ongoing struggle for me. I try to be as honest as possible about it. The thing that's helped me most with that is coaching and training other people through that process. Is because then you when you coach, this is true for most coaches and trainers, by the way. I'm sure you guys experience this as well. I'm a lot better with other people than I am with myself. Like I'm really good with clients. I'm really good when I'm helping someone else. Helping myself around that, much more of a struggle. So I still am challenged with that. I still get challenged with the, pushing it too hard and, adding another peptide to my regime or whatever. It's a constant conversation. Thankfully, I have an incredible wife who I think really good partners are good at this. They'll tell you what you need to hear sometimes, even though you don't want to hear it. And she's very patient with me. So she helps keep me. In fact, she did it this morning. I posted a video of myself, repping out pull-ups. And she goes, well, it doesn't seem like you're trying to solve the problem of, trying to get bigger all the time. And, I wanted to fire back and give her excuses. Like, well, it's, I didn't do as many as I did. And it's like, yeah, you're right. So it is a constant challenge, a constant struggle. But I mean, that's the reality. And I think having kids helps with it. Working with others helps with it. And being honest about it. These types of things flourish in the dark. And the less you talk about it, the bigger it grows. So these conversations actually help quite a bit when people ask me these questions too.
Well, I love what you said about, reframing how you look at it. You look at food as nourishment, not as like a restrictive thing. You look at the gym as self-care, not a punishment. And I would imagine as a trainer, that's probably the hardest thing to rewire, because that's how we look at it, right? That's just, however, for whatever reason, we're gym rats and we, you know what I mean? Whereas other people, particularly that are intimidated by the environment, and maybe didn't have the guidance, I think for me, it was sports growing up. And then, I playing college football, like you have the strength coach owns you, and there's nutritionists that are making sure like the second you leave the gym, you're taking a protein shake and carbs and all the things. You learn all the things because you're in that environment. But for Joe Schmo that maybe didn't have that upbringing and, was doing, the chess club when I was at football practice, it's a little different. So I love how you say that, because if you can get them to go to at the foundational level, change how they approach it, that's pretty awesome. Now I don't know how you get them to do it, but
well, I'll give you a clue. I'll give you a little hint on that, or a little hack. And this is just quite illuminating. You take somebody who is just starting to get into fitness. They're overweight. Maybe they saw a picture of themselves and they're like, oh, I'm gross. I'm going to go to the gym. And then they go work out and they beat themselves up and they almost throw up from the workout. And they come home and you're like, how was your workout? Like, oh my God, I got my ass kicked. I crawled out of the car. I almost threw up. It was great. Huh? Great. Well, yeah, it feels cathartic when you hate yourself. When you hate yourself and you're a piece of crap or you're fat or you're whatever, self-flagellation is satisfying. So that's a clue right there. If you beat the crap out of yourself, you're so sore the next day you can't move and you're satisfied, there might be a bit of an issue going on there. For the most part. Now, I'm not saying that hard workouts don't have value. I think that there's a mental component that you can develop, the little toughness and stuff that you get from it for sure. But for the most part, 90% of the time, you should have more energy and feel greater vitality at the end of your workout than you do in the beginning. If you use that as your gauge, you'll move more often than not in the right direction. if at the end of your workout you feel like you survived, and that's not rare, that happens more often than not, then you're moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and I know you've had discussions with him and had him on the podcast. Paul Chek is a mentor of mine, and he's very good at kind of finding that balance of, he calls it working in versus working out. It's like we actually need to change the framework, because like what you're even doing to your central nervous system by just hammering yourself, like there's downstream effects. And you said this too, like if you're going purely for aesthetics, yes, you might achieve that, but then he calls it being fit sick. Like there's a lot of people who are fit sick. They look great on the outside, but as far as even their ability to regulate emotions, their central nervous system, how they show up in relationships, it's very out of tune.
You know what's interesting around that too is if you look at the correlation, there's a strong correlation between depression and autoimmune issues. And for a while there, they didn't know what the relationship was. Is it the autoimmune that causes the depression, or vice versa? And what they're finding is the correlation starts with the depression and then moves to autoimmune. Well, what's the relationship there? I believe, and I think there's a lot of evidence to support this, that first off, your immune system is quite reactive to your thoughts. We know this. You hate yourself enough, your immune system starts attacking you. You become the thing that needs to be attacked. So you see rheumatoid arthritis, gut issues, strange autoimmune symptoms develop more from people who are constantly thinking about their inadequacies or how terrible they are, how bad they are, or how whatever unlovable they are. So it's a now again, I'm trying to sell it, right? So if you want that body, you want to look good, right? You got to start with where we're talking, because the path of chasing the look ends in ruin. It does not end in a great place.
Well, Sal, this has been a great conversation. So nice to meet you. And I know there's a million other directions we could have went with that. So thank you so much for hopping on and sharing some of that. And yeah, would love to get you back on another time and maybe get deeper into the weeds on strength and conditioning. I know Tony and I can nerd out about that all day.
I'd love to.
But, appreciate what you do, setting a good example. I think last thing I'll say is that, and of course this applies to women as well, but I think right now in our society, and part of it is because of all the modern comforts and the modernization, and just, of course, a lot of those things can be good, but I think there's a lack of male role models in today's society. And I think in a lot of cases, I think it's that middle-aged man that, maybe is in his 30s and is just kind of lost a little bit of purpose and is just kind of going through the motions, and maybe was once a good athlete, but is now, 50 pounds overweight, and, just every day is Groundhog's Day. And it's cool that there's strong male role models like you putting out good word that, guys can, get back on that path. So I just want to thank you and your crew over there for doing that. And, I think we need more of that. And I would argue that's one of the good things of social media and all these, kind of things is there. While there's a bunch of trash you can get exposed to, there's content like what you guys are putting out that is gold, that, can really get people back on the right path. So I appreciate what you guys do, man. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
I appreciate that. And one thing I'll add to that, the first, one of the first sins in my faith that a man committed was the sin of passivity. He sat around, his wife, ate the forbidden fruit. God asked him what happened. He said, she got the apple. I don't know. I think there's a lot of wisdom there. And so you give a man a purpose and he'll drag himself across glass to get there. And without a purpose, men are lost. This is human psychology. So you got to have it.
Spot on, man. So well put. Tony, anything else?
No, let's close out on what you said. It's ditto, and I feel the same. So thank you for your time, Sal. And I know the listeners will get a lot out of this one.
All right. Appreciate it.